Chapter 2511. Rory let out a hearty laugh. I find that you're quite talented in scriptwriting. I can see why Merlin sent you to me. Uncle Rory. Norman came out of the room and bumped into Freya, Leia, and his uncle. Rory grabbed his ear, causing Norman to squint in pain. Ouch, it hurts, Uncle Rory. Look at you. She can come up with something better than the idea you gave her. After Rory released Norman, the latter touched his ear and forced a smile on his face. Well, I just managed to learn a little bit from you. After he finished speaking, he continued. I've seen Freya's script, and I think it's very nice. Why don't you take a look at it? Freya let out a chuckle as Norman was promoting her script to Rory. I don't think now is the right time. Isn't today your family banquet? Well, Rory took a drag from his cigarette and turned around. Before he went back into the house, he said, you can show me afterward. I'll see if it's really as good as Norman said or not. Norman knew that Rory had accepted them. He looked at Freya and said, see. My uncle has said yes. Freya and Leia looked at each other and smiled. It was very lively in the hall. There were many people, and it appeared to Freya that the Lancells were rather popular amongst the aristocrats. Norman brought them to Mrs. Lancel and Stephen. Mom, Dad, meet my coursemates. Stephen smiled at them gently and said, welcome to my house. The moment Mrs. Lancel saw Freya, she was dumbfounded. After measuring her from her head to her toe, her face sank, but she did not say anything. Stephen turned to Norman and said, since they're your coursemates, I'll trust you'll entertain them well, right? Of course, Dad. Norman brought them to the side to enjoy the food and to rest. Mrs. Lancel took Stephen to one side and asked, why did Norman invite her? Stephen was stunned. Her, Sandy's daughter. Have you forgotten about Ken? She is his sister. When Ken was trying to take over the kingdom, he had tried to rope in the Lancells. As for Sandy, she had threatened her as well, telling her to get out of her son's way if she was not going to help them. Although it was a good thing that the cancers among the aristocrats had been removed after Ken's death and Sandy's imprisonment, she could not believe that her son would become friends with Sandy's daughter. After all, Sandy and her family were a bunch of sinister and cunning people in Mrs. Lancel's impression. She had not liked Sandy since the first day she met her. Stephen was dumbfounded. She's one of the Pruitts. Mrs. Lancel said with confidence, her eyes look a lot like Sandy's when she was young, so I'm sure she is her daughter. Stephen placed his hand on her shoulder and said, it's in the past. Besides, Sandy is in prison right now. Even if she's her daughter, she has never done anything to harm us. I'm sure you're just overthinking. I'm just worried about my son. There's nothing to worry about. The Queen has acknowledged the Pruitts, so the Pruitts are one of the aristocrats right now, making her a close relative of the royal family. Since our son invited her, we must entertain her with respect. If we ignore her and word gets out, what do you think other people will think of us? Mrs. Lancel felt her husband was right. They couldn't disrespect Freya right now since everyone was here. However, after the banquet was over, she decided to tell her son to keep his distance from Freya. Chapter 2512. Meanwhile, Norman brought them some snacks and juice. Leia took a glass of juice and approached Freya. Did you see Norman's mother's eyes when she looked at you? Leia could see that Isabel did not like Freya from her eyes. However, she did not tell Freya about it since she did not want Freya to think too much. Freya let out a smile. She had realized it as well. Maybe it's because she knows my mother. My mother used to mingle with them in the past. That being said, she knew that her mother did not have a good relationship with any of them, and this could be proven by the fact that none of them had visited or mentioned her mother ever since she was sent to prison. If Isabel could recognize her, she could understand why she did not like her. Leia tried to comfort her and said, no matter what your mother did, it has nothing to do with you. So don't think too much. Thank you. Don't mention it. After all, we're friends. While both of them were talking, Norman came over and asked if they wanted to go dancing. Freya pushed Leia forward and said, you should go join them. I'll just stay here. Leia looked at her and said, but I can't leave you alone. Freya smiled. If I dance with another man, I may have big trouble coaxing my husband at home if he gets jealous. It was only then Leia remembered that Freya was married. She said, "All right, then. You stay here and wait for me." Freya nodded. Leia went toward the crowd with Norman. Freya sat there alone, sipping on her juice. Soon, a middle-aged man who was a little drunk came over and sat beside her. She scooted to the side to keep her distance from the man. The man had been watching her for a long time. He realized that she had been sitting here alone for a long time and no one had paid any attention to her, so he thought that she was someone else's companion. Generally speaking, there were two types of women at a banquet. One type would follow their male partners around, and they mostly were their wives. The other type was women hired by men to serve as their partners. He placed his hands on her thigh, ignoring the slight change of expression on Freya's face, and said, "Girl, did you get abandoned by your partner? Why don't you come and entertain me instead?" Normally, when Freya was in this kind of situation, she would probably have splashed the juice in her hand on the shameless man's face. However, she was at the Lancells' banquet now. She did not want to make a scene, so she pressed down her anger and smiled politely. "I'm sorry, but you should stay away from me. Things might not end well for you if my friend gets angry." The man's face sank since he did not expect Freya to reject him. He loathed women who liked to put on airs as well, so he said, "Who is your friend?" "Norman. Even if you're Norman's friend, he's just Mr. Lancell's son. He won't be a threat to me. He's Mr. Lancell's son, but he's also the future successor of the Lancells. That's something that will only happen in the future. We'll only talk about the present. If your friend really thought you're that important, why would he leave you alone here?" The man said as he grabbed Freya's arm. Freya tried to break herself free from the man but to no avail. Her face sank, and she said, "Don't you think it's embarrassing to harass a woman at a banquet while you're drunk?" "No woman has ever dared to reject me," the man said sarcastically as he dragged her. "If you want to shout to get help, you can do it now. But I don't think you have the guts to do that. I know exactly what you want, so drop the act. Don't worry, I'll give you money." Freya glanced at the ashtray on the table and stretched her hand to reach for it. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Well, are you drunk, Mr. Andrews? Do you need me to remind you where you are right now?" It was Rory. Mr. Andrews hastily released Freya. It was only now that he saw Freya was holding an ashtray in her hand, and he frowned. However, he did not say anything since Rory was there. Chapter 2513. Mr. Andrews whipped up a smile on his face and said, "This is just a misunderstanding, Mr. Lancells. I was just playing around with her. She's Professor Merlin's favorite student, so I suggest you think twice if you really want to do something to her." Mr. Andrews' expression changed. He contemplated for a while before rising to his feet and going away. Freya placed the ashtray down and asked, "He knows Professor Merlin?" Rory sat on the couch on the side and took a sip of his wine. "Do you think Merlin is just some old, highly respected professor? His younger brother established the Academy of Film and Television. His father was the Minister of Foreign Affairs before he retired from the cabinet. Except for Merlin himself, all of his family members have or are working in the cabinet for generations." Freya was dumbfounded. She did not expect her professor to come from such a family. After all, he had been keeping a low profile and seldom talked about his family. "Thank you, Mr. Lancell. This ashtray would have become a weapon if you didn't show up." She chuckled. "Yeah, and it'd be problematic if something like that happened." Rory put the glass down and stood up. "Send your script to my office by noon tomorrow. But I'll make it clear first. I won't give you a chance if I'm not satisfied with your script." Freya stood up and said excitedly, "Okay." At the villa, Colton was flipping through the magazine absent-mindedly while glancing at the clock from time to time. It was already 10 p.m., yet Freya hadn't returned. Is she having so much fun over there that she refuses to come home? If I had known this would happen, I would have never allowed her to go out and make more friends. She has been ignoring her husband ever since she got more friends. The more Colton thought about it, the more annoyed he became. At that moment, the whirring of the car engine wafted into his ears. He hastily lowered his head to read the magazine and thought, HMPH. I thought she had already forgotten that this was her home. Freya came into the living room with a big smile on her face. When he saw the smile on her face, his face sank. It seems like you're having a good time. Freya walked over to Colton and sat beside him. Were you waiting for me? Nope, I was not waiting for you. I was just reading a magazine. Even if you had not come back, I would have gone to bed anyway, he said. She glanced at the cover of the magazine and pointed at it. Really, I didn't know that you could read upside down. It was only now that Colton realized he had been holding the magazine the wrong way. He closed the magazine and took a deep breath. I'm going to bed now. Freya grabbed him and said, I know you're waiting for me. Why can't you just admit it? It seemed to Colton that she was getting bolder and bolder lately. She even had the nerve to tease him. Now, he pinned her down on the couch and kissed her. It seems like I didn't punish you enough, huh? Freya hastily placed her hands on his chest and asked, what are you doing? My dad is here. Colton grinned and said, he has already gone to bed. But that doesn't mean you can. The quiet living room was filled with their moans. Freya was nervous, so she bit Colton's shoulder tightly throughout the entire process. After their session ended, Colton kissed her forehead and laughed. You nearly broke my bones. Freya was angry with him, so she did not say anything in return. Colton scooped her up into his arms and said, all right, let's go back to our room and continue. Freya stopped him. What? I need to wake up early tomorrow. After they entered the bathroom, he placed her down on the floor. She needed to place her hand on the wall to support herself. When she turned around and saw that he was still in the bathroom, she said, what are you waiting for? Go out. He stood with his arms crossed in front of his chest. A few buttons on his slightly wrinkled shirt were left unbuttoned. There was a languid and frivolous smile tugging at the corner of his eyes as he said, it's not that I've never seen it before. Freya pushed him out of the bathroom. How can you be so shameless? Get out right now. After that, she closed the door. Colton leaned on the wall and chuckled. Are you not going to take your pajamas? Chapter 2514. After a short while, Freya opened the door and popped her head out. Then take them for me. He squinted and replied, say it properly. Freya took a deep breath, gnashed her teeth, and said with a smile, darling, can you help me to get my clothes, please? That's more like it. Colton then went to the dressing room to help her get her clothes, including her undergarments. Freya hastily took them from his hand and slammed the door shut. It might have hit Colton's nose if he stood closer to the door. He clicked his tongue and thought, how can she still be angry at me after I've done everything she asked me to? It seems like I need to tell my daughter so that she won't pick up these bad habits from her mother. Freya came out of the bathroom after she finished her bath. When she saw that Colton was reading her script on the bed, she went forward and took it away from his hand. He did not expect something like that from her, so he took a step back, causing her to lose her balance and fall on his body. Colton lifted his eyebrows and asked, what's this about? Can't your husband see your script? What if you laugh at me? Give it back to me. Freya stretched her arm forward to reach for her script, but Colton did not give her a chance. He pressed her into his arms and said, what makes you think that I'll laugh at you? Do you have so little confidence in yourself? She was stunned for a moment but did not say anything. He picked her hair that fell in front of her face away with his finger and said, I'm beyond happy that my woman is so talented. Freya's face turned red. She stood up straight and turned her body around. Since when did he become so good at complimenting other people? Colton hugged her from the back and placed his chin on her shoulder. It'd be even nicer if you were not that hot-tempered. She hit him with her elbow, and the next thing she heard was a muffled grunt of pain. Shocked, she hastily turned around to check on Colton. Did it really hurt? He collapsed on the floor and covered his chest. Are you trying to kill your husband? I'm so sorry about that. Where does it hurt? Let me see. Just as she finished her sentence and tried to lift his clothes, Colton suddenly chuckled and hugged her. It won't hurt anymore if you kiss me. It occurred to Freya that Colton was lying to her. She turned around and lay aside with her back facing him. Colton placed one of his hands on his temple and coiled his finger around her hair. Will our daughter be like you when she grows up later? It'd be better if she were like you, she said honestly. He was stunned for a moment, and then he grabbed her into his arms from the back. With a low voice, he said, then what if she inherits my personality and your talent? Freya's eyelashes trembled. Even though Colton had a sharp tongue, she still couldn't help herself but fall for him even more at a moment like this when this man got gentle. Lying in Colton's arms, she gradually got sleepy and soon fell asleep. The next day, at Tom's Films. In order to give Rory a good impression, Freya woke up early and had been waiting for him in his company since 10 a.m. Rory and his assistant arrived at the company at 11 a.m. The receptionist informed them about Freya, and they went straight to the reception room. I told you to come at noon, but you came an hour early. Not bad. Rory sat on the couch after entering the room, and his assistant stood beside him. Have you brought your script? Freya pulled her script out of her bag and said, yes. Here it is. Please have a look at it. Rory took over the script. Just when he flipped it open, his assistant craned his neck and glanced at it. He raised his head to glance at his assistant, and his assistant smiled at him embarrassingly. Well, I'm curious as well. He did not say anything and continued to read through the script. Freya felt like there were ants in her pants as she waited for Rory. In fact, she could change the things that he was not satisfied with. But Rory had told her that he would not give her a second chance if he found her script unsatisfactory, then. Therefore, she did not dare to have many expectations. She had checked through the script multiple times before coming here. She even corrected all of the errors in the script and made sure that it was as perfect as she could make it. Chapter 2515. After roughly half an hour, Rory asked the assistant next to him for his comment. What do you think? The assistant snapped himself out of the trance. I'm asking for your opinion. What do you think about this script? The assistant did not expect Rory to ask him for his opinion. He was stunned for a long while, but he still had to give Rory his answer. I think it's pretty good. Freya set her jaw tightly as her heart was pumping faster and faster inside her chest. Rory said, it isn't a bad script. You've added many details to flesh out your characters and plots. Each person has their own storyline. They seem to be related but aren't related at the same time. However, all of these characters have some connection to the deceased, which can be linked together to find out the killer's motive. Freya was shocked. Does this mean that my script has no issue? Nope. Rory closed the script, and his face was stern. Just when Freya's heart jumped into her throat, he continued. Behind a crime hides the evil of human nature, and although these evils of yours may seem trivial, they are very real when placed in life. Whether it is a crime of passion or a premeditated crime, it's mostly fueled by the desire to own something such as money, lust, and benefits, or the criminals might just carry out the crime for their own sake. Rory placed the script on the table and continued. The evil in human nature is like a shy little kid. They'll only start expressing themselves after being aroused or excited. The reason most people refrain themselves from committing evil is that the law and moral standards bind them. Miss Mills seems like an innocent person on the surface, but when someone found evidence of her stealing her company's secret, she still chose to take their life for her own sake. If she had turned herself into the police, the judge might have given her a lighter sentence since she was also a victim. She might even get a few years off her imprisonment. The tragedy could have been prevented, and a family could have been saved. The most pitiful character is Mr. Ledger. He was a high executive for a company in the city, had a successful career, and was both talented and good-looking. He should have a bright future, but in order to clear the way for his sister so that she could marry into a wealthy family, he threatened Miss Mills when he found out that she was stealing the company's secrets and used her to get rid of his future brother-in-law's father before killing her for his sister's sake. In the end, his sister finally managed to marry into a wealthy family as she wished, and the poor young master is still unaware that his wife's brother is the man behind his father's death. However, his sister wasn't a good person either. The reason she wanted to marry into a wealthy family was to cover up her past so that she could get more benefits for herself. What surprises me the most is that the killer isn't one of these well-dressed monsters in human form, but an unknown and unremarkable worker. Rory crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned on the back of the couch. Your script. Freya lowered her eyes and clenched her hands tightly. It's interesting. She was stunned slightly and jerked her head up. Rory's assistant was even more excited than her as he said, Mr. Lancel said that your script is interesting. This is the first time I've heard Mr. Lancel complimenting someone. Freya soon came around to her senses and smiled. After she left Tom's Films, she wanted to share her happiness with Leia and Norman. However, she called Colton first. Colton answered the call and sounded as if he had just woken up. Yeah, I have already finished my stuff, and you still haven't woken up yet? He turned around and chuckled. Well, someone exhausted all my energy last night, so I need to sleep to replenish my energy. Chapter 2516. Freya cleared her throat. My script has been selected. Really? Colton's smile intensified. Congratulations, it seems that my wife is on her way to becoming a famous screenwriter and maybe even a female director in the future. She sneered. Would you like to come out for a meal? It's on me. Colton sat up instantly upon hearing this. Are you serious? Just come if you want to. If you don't want to, then forget about it. I'm hanging up already. After saying that, Freya really hung up the phone, leaving her speechless husband hanging. That temper, that arrogance. However, his grin widened, and he lifted the blanket immediately, got out of bed, and went into the bathroom. When Colton arrived at the restaurant joyously, he realized that two more individuals were sitting at the dining table, and his expression dimmed instantly. Leia was the first to see him. Your husband's here, Freya explained with a smile. I'm the one who asked him to join us. It was Norman's first time meeting Colton. Yo, this fella's temperament, not bad at all. Colton straightened his coat, walked over, greeted them politely, and sat down. At that moment, Norman put down his wine glass. Do you want some wine? Colton gave off a faint smile. I'm driving, so wine is out of the equation for me. I'll have a cup of coffee. Freya summoned the waiter and ordered him a cup of Blue Mountain, black and sugarless. Colton leaned into her ear. You finally remember what I like. Freya pushed him away. Sit properly. Colton sat down obediently. Leia rested her cheek in her palm and chuckled. You two have such a good relationship. I'm so envious. Colton smiled, nodded, and agreed. Freya flipped through the menu and responded, this only started after I gave birth. I don't think I was treated with care before that. Colton was at a loss for words. Leia and Norman exclaimed in unison, what? You guys actually have kids? Thinking that she did not seem to have told them about it, Freya let off a helpless smile. Ah, I might have forgotten to update you guys on this before. I got pregnant and gave birth to a child. That's why I delayed my plan to take on a master's program. Leia was in disbelief. You really don't look like someone who's given birth to a child. Norman shrugged. That's normal. My mother gave birth to me at the age of 20. She claims that the earlier a woman gives birth, the faster her body recovers. You saw her the other night, didn't you? Does she look like a woman who's in her 40s to you? My dad's 57 years old this year, so whenever he brings her out to social events, others usually think that she's his mistress instead of his wife. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched. Where did he find the courage to say something like that? A waiter brought the coffee, and Colton picked up the cup and took a sip. And that was when Norman suddenly asked him, Mr. Goldman, will you bring your wife out to social events? Freya looked in Colton's direction, wanting to hear the answer that was going to come out of him. Colton lifted his gaze and put down his cup. Why should I bring her out to events? That's what a man should do. As for the wife, one should just keep his wife at home to entertain himself. Norman frowned. Then does that mean that your wife isn't someone that you're proud to have in your life? Freya narrowed her eyes and glared at Colton. Colton did not expect that this fella would twist his words back at him, so he chuckled. Then do enlighten me. Will you bring a precious artwork or artifact that you own at home out just to share its brilliance with others? Norman was taken aback. In this case, I won't. That's the answer that you're looking for. If you won't even want to share your treasure with others, why should I share mine with you? Just so that others will yearn for it? Norman was rendered speechless. What this fella just said makes sense. Freya did not expect Colton to respond to the question this way. It seems that he's finally found his long-lost EQ. Colton looked back at Norman. You should remind your father to be more careful. Chapter 2517. Norman wondered. Why so? I once heard a story about a man who married a young and beautiful wife. The man was obsessed with keeping up an appearance, so he often brought his wife out to social events in order to get showered with the public's praises. Thus, wherever he went, his wife would also be there. However, as time passed, his wife met a man who treated her more gently and looked more handsome than her husband, so she betrayed her and cheated on him with that man in the end. Norman spurted out the wine that he had just drunk when he heard the plot twist and got caught off guard. Colton quickly picked up the napkin and blocked the wine stream. Norman's eyes widened as if he was extremely taken aback. Leia and Freya could not help but laugh out loud. After that, Norman did not dare to cause any more trouble, and he stayed very absent-minded throughout the whole meal as if the story that Colton had told would happen to his parents. I must preach this to my father when I get back home. Freya approached Colton and whispered in his ear, you really know how to make up stories. He looked over and raised his brows. My wife has the talent for creating stories, so why can't I have the same talent too? While they were eating, Colton got up and went to the restroom. When he came to the corner of the corridor, a red-haired woman bumped into him, and his phone dropped to the ground. The red-haired woman instantly picked it up for him and returned it to him with a pitiful expression. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean it. It's okay. Colton was in a good mood today, so he did not make things difficult for her. He took his phone back from her and went straight to the bathroom. Looking at Colton, who was leaving her immediately, the corners of the red-haired woman's lips curled slightly upward. She grabbed the wallet that she picked out from his pocket triumphantly and hurried away. Colton came out of the bathroom and returned to the table. After the four of them had finished eating, he wanted to pay the bill and reached for his pocket. That was when he realized that it was empty. Freya felt helpless. I told you that the meal is on me. You don't have to pay. No. Colton stood up abruptly. My wallet is gone. Leia was stunned for a moment. Your wallet went missing. Freya asked. How did you lose it? Are you sure that you brought it out in the first place? I'm sure. My passport and ID card are inside. After saying that, something suddenly flashed across his mind, and his expression dimmed in an instant. It happened a while ago. Have you brought your laptop along? He asked Norman. Norman paused for a split second and then nodded. Yes. Lend it to me. Norman did not know why, but he naturally handed him his laptop. After Colton sat down, he quickly operated the laptop and hacked into the restaurant's surveillance system. The surveillance footage was paused at the moment when the red-haired woman hit him at the corner of the corridor, and it could be seen that the red-haired woman was holding his wallet. He closed the lid of the laptop. Damn it! That woman actually has the guts to steal my wallet. It seemed that the woman was a habitual offender. After all, he did not even notice when she snatched his wallet. Freya frowned. If you lose your ID card in Zelakova, you can get it reissued, but if you lose your passport and ID card abroad, it'll be very troublesome. Leia comforted the couple. Do you want to call the police? We have surveillance footage to prove it, so the police should be able to locate the woman very quickly. Freya immediately took her cell phone out and called the police. At the precinct, a police officer went through the surveillance footage and frowned as if he had a headache. Freya noticed something and asked, is there any problem? The police officer was a little embarrassed. It's not a problem, it's just that we know this lady very well. Leia was astonished for a moment. What do you mean by that? It's not her first time stealing. We've been receiving many cases of theft since some time ago, and they're all her doing. She's been sent here many times, and we've taught her many lessons. We tried locking her up for 1 night, 3 days, or even 7 days. The police officer explained and then shrugged. She'll commit another crime as soon as she's released. However, the amount that she stole has always been very small, so the owner of the wallets and purses can't build a case on her as the court won't take the case in at all. Chapter 2518. Leia and Freya exchanged gazes. They were in Yaramore, and the laws here were not as strict as the Xylocavian laws. Moreover, even if the offender was arrested for petty theft, they would not be able to build a case. Thus, the red-haired woman would at most be brought into custody for a few days. It was no wonder that the police officer looked embarrassed. After all, they had become accustomed to such behaviors. In addition, the other party was a habitual offender who had repeatedly gone against the law and got caught too, so it was only natural for the police to feel helpless. Colton crossed his arms. I don't care about the money, but I have to get my passport and ID back. The police officer stood up slowly. Okay, I'll tell you where she lives. When the three of them walked out of the precinct, Norman was wandering back and forth in front of the car. Seeing them come out of the front entrance, he asked, how did it go? Did you find the thief? Leia looked rather disappointed and upset. What are the local police officers doing? They didn't even send someone to arrest the woman but asked us to go find her ourselves instead. Norman had gotten used to this. Norman did not look surprised. Hasn't this always been the case? Unless it's a major crime, they wouldn't have the time to deal with such a petty theft. Moreover, the precinct of each region has been severely undermanned recently, so they can't dispatch so much manpower at any time because it'll be troublesome once a major crime breaks out. They're just following their superiors' orders, so please try to understand the position that they're in. Freya smiled. All right, the police officer gave us her address, didn't he? If the lady stole only for the money, then I think she won't refuse to cooperate when we ask her for Coleman's passport and ID card, will she? Leia thought that was the only way to go and asked Norman to drive them to the address written on the sticky note. Norman was about to ignite the engine when he took the note from Leia, glanced at the address, and was taken aback. This is the address of a nursing home. Are you sure that the officer has given you the correct address? Freya and Leia were surprised. A nursing home. The car arrived at number 18 of Wilford Hill not long after. Wilford Hill was a small town outside the suburbs, and its environment was very quiet. Although it was not as prosperous as downtown, it had a very strong exotic atmosphere. And number 18 was the address of a nursing home. This nursing home looked quite small in size, and the facilities were very old. Most of the people sitting in the yard were elderly people. Freya walked into the courtyard, and a nun came out of the house. How may I help you? She replied, we're here to find someone. There she is. Colton locked onto the person at a glance and went after her. Norman chased after Colton instantly. Wait for me. The red-haired woman did not expect them to actually come after her, so she turned around and sprinted away immediately. Leia and Freya also went after the two men hurriedly. The red-haired woman escaped through the backyard. Colton and Norman ran in different directions but were still going after the same target. Although she was fast, she was still a little slower when facing the two men. Soon, she was pinned down by Norman, who appeared out of nowhere. Let me go, you freak. The red-haired woman struggled on the ground and was quickly picked up by Colton, who caught up to them. Give me my passport and ID card back. The red-haired woman denied arrogantly, I haven't seen any passport or ID card. Norman grabbed her by the arm. Hey, you'd better cooperate, or we'll send you to the precinct. The red-haired woman looked indifferent. You can do whatever the fuck you want. It's not like I haven't been there before. Leia and Freya caught up to them at this time, and the two were gasping for air. Freya panted. Miss, stealing is against the law. But no matter what, we don't want the money back, but the passport and ID card are very important. So, please return those documents to us. Chapter 2519. The red-haired woman fell silent for a short moment but then turned her face away from all of them. I've lost it. Colton's expression turned even gloomier and sterner. What did you just say? I said I lost it. What's wrong? Are you telling me that you're going to hit a feeble woman? Come on now, hit me. The red-haired woman moved her face closer to Colton. Colton raised his hand. Freya stopped him immediately. Calm down. Look around you. Colton looked around. Many people from around town were watching. The red-haired woman flung Norman's hand off her arm and crossed her arms. If you dare lay a finger on me here, then I'll tell the police that you're deliberately causing trouble at a nursing home. We'll then see whether you or I will be the one who gets sent to the precinct. What an arrogant wretch. Leia could not stand her anymore and walked out from the group of four. It's obvious that you're the one who stole someone else's wallet, so what do you expect us to do apart from asking you to give the wallet back? What right do you have to say that we're causing trouble? Do you have evidence to claim that I'm the thief who stole your wallet? The red-haired woman sneered. You. Just as Leia was about to say something, she was interrupted by Freya's eerily calm voice. What if we do have evidence? The red-haired woman was astounded for a moment, but she still refused to believe it. Bullshit, I don't believe that you can come up with evidence. I'm really sorry. We possess surveillance footage that captured your theft red-handed, and this address was given to us by the police. Apparently, the police are already very familiar with you, and they're perfect witnesses for your criminal history. The red-haired woman was rendered speechless and tightened her hands that were hanging by her sides. At that moment, the nun came over with a solemn expression. Mia, is what they just said true? Did you do it again? The red-haired woman, whose name was Mia, did not say a thing. The nun stopped in front of her. Didn't you promise your brother and me not to do it again? Why would you repeat the offense? She replied, Sister, this is my business. I'll take care of it myself. The nun frowned. How do you plan to take care of it? And you promised me not to commit any crime again. What if your brother learns about it? You can't tell him. It's never about whether I want to tell him about what you've done or not. It's you. You have to admit your mistake when you've done something wrong. After the nun finished teaching Mia a lesson, she turned to look at Colton and Freya. I'm really sorry. Don't worry. If she has taken your wallet, I'll definitely get her to return it to you. Colton nodded. The nun turned around, glanced at Mia, and stretched out her hand. Where's the wallet? Mia curled her lips and lowered her head. I've gotten rid of it. What? The nun was so exasperated that she was about to curse. Where did you get rid of it? I only want the money. The other things in it are useless to me, so I just threw them into the trash can. Colton gasped, and his patience had reached its limit. Which trash can did you throw it into? Mia was embarrassed. The trash can in the nursing home. I guess it must have been taken to the landfill. Colton left immediately. Norman was dumbfounded for a moment. Please don't tell me that he's going to the landfill now. Freya did not respond and went after Colton. Leia glared at Mia and caught up to them. Seeing that they had all left, Norman could only follow. The nun rubbed her forehead angrily. Mia, you're really a pro when it comes to causing trouble. Do you know that passports are very important to tourists from other countries? You'd better pray to God, asking him to forgive you for your crimes. The nun left the scene in a hurry too. The huge landfill was pervaded with a disgusting stench. Norman pinched his nose and stared at the piles of garbage. My God, please tell me that you don't plan to dig into the mountains of garbage. And just how long will this take? Colton took off his coat, shoved it into Norman's arms, rolled up his sleeves, and went in without uttering a single word. Chapter 2520. Freya also went in to look for it. Leia also wanted to step into the garbage pile, but Norman stopped her. What are you doing? Do you really plan to join them for the fun of it? Leia looked back at him. How long will it take for the two of them to find the wallet? So, of course, I'm going to help them out. After saying that, she shook his hand off, rushed in, and started to search through the trash. Norman hugged Colton's coat and wanted to go in to help, but he could not ignore the smell of the garbage. After going through a mental debate, he took off his coat, folded it, placed it on the ground, and rushed into the garbage pile, covering his nose. Fuck it, I'll help out. Freya went through each and every bag of the rubbish while enduring the stench, then continued to search after retching. She then looked back at Leia and Norman, thanking them deep down. Colton searched for a long time. It was so disgusting that his face had turned pale, and the white shirt that he was wearing was stained full of dirt and vile garbage. This was his first time finding himself in such an embarrassing state since he was a kid, digging through bags and bags of garbage. However, he had to find it. In addition to his passport and ID card, there were other things that were important to him. Norman could no longer bear the stench and dashed outside to vomit. Leia handed him a tissue. "Are you okay?" He took the tissue from her. Fortunately, the aroma of the tissue could suppress his nausea. "I'm fine. I really admire him now. He actually managed to endure the smell up until this very moment." As a man, he felt like he had lost. "You should grab some rest on the side first. I'll go and find the wallet with them." Leia turned around and was about to leave when she saw Mia and the nun coming over. The nun had also brought 3 villagers along. "We're here to help you search for your wallet. You're lucky that all the garbage that was collected today is here. If you were to come here tomorrow, I'm afraid it would have been too late." Leia nodded. "Thank you." Everyone went in to look for the wallet. Mia also wanted to join them but was stopped by Leia. "It's better for you to stay here. Who knows what you'll do there." Mia wanted to defend herself but did not dare to do so due to the presence of the nun. But after searching through the mountains of garbage for 2 hours, they still could not find it. The landfill was too huge, and no one knew where the specific bag of garbage was dumped. At this time, Freya saw a stray dog rummaging through a bag of trash not far away. She squinted, stood up abruptly, and shouted to the nun, "Sister, does anyone here own a dog?" One of the villagers replied, "I do have one." "Then, can you bring your dog here?" The villager nodded. "Of course." Colton paused for a short moment and then stared at Freya. "A dog, why didn't I think of it?" Freya clapped her hands and said to the others, "Everyone, let's stop for a while. You've worked hard, so let's grab some rest. We'll have a solution when the dog's here." Norman gave her a thumbs up. "You're a genius. Why didn't I think of this? We've spent so much time in vain." Freya smiled and walked toward Colton. "Our noses will never be as good as that of a dog, right?" He chuckled. "Yeah, it was really a waste of time." The villager brought his German shepherd over, and Freya walked over and asked, "What's its name?" "It must be a very obedient dog. This fella is Hal. It's very obedient and sensible." "Then it's about to make our night a lot easier." Freya asked, "Can I give it a pat?" "It's fine. It's not afraid of strangers." Freya caressed Hal on its head while Hal sat on the ground without showing any form of resistance, sticking its tongue out at the same time. Norman brought Colton's jacket over, and Freya placed it in front of the dog's nose for it to get a brief sniff. "Hal, it's up to you now. Go." Hal's master patted it on the back and pointed to the landfill. Hal instantly got up and ran toward the mountains of garbage.